Hey everyone, and welcome back to Build. I'm your host, Brittany Jones-Cooper. Whitney Houston broke more music industry records than any other female singer in history and sold more than 200 million albums worldwide. She was beloved by many, but also experienced some intense struggles in her private and public life. The documentary Whitney is an intimate portrait of Houston that looks behind the tabloids and sheds a new life on her extraordinary journey to success. Today, I'll be joined by her sister-in-law, Pat Houston, to discuss this very personal project. But first, let's check out a clip.
Yeah, loneliness calls.
Her voice, I was totally knocked out.
Oh, you missed something if you don't see her live.
Do you love? Do you say? Do you love? Do you say you love? Do you say you love? Do you say you love?
There were times when I would look up to God and I'd go, why is this happening to me?
I come from a family of singers.
My mom, she was a little tough on Whitney because she knew what Whitney had.
There were always a lot of secrets. When you don't resolve things and you don't deal with things, they never go away.
Share my life.
Tell me about Robin Crawford.
Robin was her safety net. Bobby was jealous. His heart was, he wanted to be on the stage. He wanted to be in the forefront.
And eventually, she stepped down to lift him up.
People think it's so easy, and it's not.
You got class, you got something around the ride.
Now, one thing, Paula Abdul ain't shit. That girl is singing off-key on the record.
I don't really need to look.
Why didn't Sissy do more?
What was Whitney's drug of choice?
What was it that drove them apart?
How much do you think you spent?
Did John ever try and get rid of Robin?
Were they in love?
Can't run from myself. There's no way.
You must have known about the drug use.
I never knew there was any addiction.
And that's all that matters.
Hearing her sing the Star Spangled Banner, she made people proud that they were Americans.
Don't you dare.
She was beautiful.
I'm singing music from my heart.
Hot.
If I don't love you.
Everybody put your hands together for Pat Houston. Thank you so much for joining us today. How are you doing today?
A little exhausted, but I'm good. Good to be here.
Yeah. You know, I got to see the documentary, I think like 2 days ago, and it stays with you. It really does. It's not one of those things that you kind of leave behind. I feel like I'll always have a kind of a piece of this with me because I'm sure a lot of people can relate to this. She was my first cassette album at 7. You know, my first cassette tape was I'm Every Woman.
At 7?
At 7.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So I, loved her, and watching this story be told by the people who loved her the most was really important for me to see. So first, thank you for doing that. And you're an executive producer on this documentary. So why did you guys want to tell the story now?
Well, really, there's no timetable in telling a story. And I always tell everyone that anyone that has a life has a story. You know, every single day that you wake up, you add to that story. You know, Whitney, probably back in 1999, years ago, she decided then that she wanted to do a documentary. And everything is about timing, you know. And after seeing so many documentaries that were out there and Lifetime stories that were out there and people just making assumptions and telling stories, it's certainly not fair to her. So the timing was right and we felt right. There's been a lot of healing and still continuing to heal. We just thought this would be the best time.
And did the family have any participation in any of the other Lifetime movies or documentaries that have been done about Whitney up until this point?
Except for a documentary where they shoplifted our footage, but no, there was no participation.
So this is the first one really where the family was involved and kind of co-signed everything.
Absolutely.
That means a lot. And so take me back just a little bit. I want to know more about you and Whitney's relationship. So when did you first meet Whitney?
I met Whitney around 1992, you know, when I met my husband, Gary. And Gary and I have been married for 24 years. We've been together for 26, but I met her. I went out to see Gary in Las Vegas where she was performing, and that was my first time meeting her. Yeah.
And what are your favorite memories of Whitney? Is there one that really kind of sticks out?
You know what? There's many that stick out, but every holiday, since I've known her, she's always called on birthdays. She was the very first person to call me, "Happy birthday, Pat," or if it's an anniversary, "Happy anniversary." Holidays, the very same. But in particular, it was an anniversary for Gary and I, and she wanted to go. And we didn't tell her where we were going. And she called her security, she called my executive assistant, and they wouldn't tell her where we were. She was angry because she wanted to be on that trip. And she was like that because she was so used to having someone with her when she goes on her vacations and when she goes on her trips. I guess she felt that we should do the same. And Gary and I are like, no, I don't think so. So that was fun memory, but there are many.
Sisters can be like that too.
Oh my God, bratty.
Yes, exactly. And you were her manager as well at what point? And so how did that kind of happen?
I didn't, when Gary and I got married, I did not, I started my own business in North Carolina. That's where I'm from. My father had passed that year in 1994. And of course, when I finished high school and went off to college, I never lived at home. So I wasn't around my mother and family a lot. So when I got married, I decided to start a business there called Trisha's Jewels. So we were never around them in New Jersey. And it was, I guess, from 1994 to 1997, after my daughter was born, and we were back in New Jersey, and I started going out to see Gary on the road. So I was around when I was visiting, and it wasn't until, I believe, the millennium, 2000, she called me, and I was actually working on a project in New Jersey with Irving Street Rep, with Curtis Sparrow, and Whitney called me and asked me if I would find out from her father, what was happening with her case in Hawaii. And I asked her, "Why are you calling me?" She said, "Well, Pat, just call Daddy. You guys have a great relationship. Call him and find out what's going on." So I did. I investigated the situation. We ended up firing the attorney that she had. And from that moment, she asked me would I work with her, and I was extremely reluctant to do it, but I did. And that was at a time whenever she was an icon. Everything that she could do, she had already done. And I think the moment that she was calling on me, she needed something much, much more than a manager. And I always tell people that I came into her life to kind of ease the pain that life had brought to her, to help her find the peace that her spirit needed. So I fit all of the qualifications that she needed for a person that she could trust and could be enduring. And I think I played that role very well for her.
I would imagine that trust component to be very important for her, especially at that point in her career.
Absolutely.
The documentary does a really great job of just telling the full story from beginning to end. And I really, of course, love the beginning part where you see young Whitney finding her voice and working with Sissy. And Sissy's actually a part of that part of the documentary where she's sitting in the church and she's sort of talking about those early days. Was it difficult to get Sissy to be a part? Because I know she's very private. Or was she excited to kind of share some of her favorite memories of Whitney?
It was difficult for her. It's, when you lose a child at 48 years old, and you always think that you're going first. You never anticipate that your children are going to go before you. But Sissy could tell you in any interview, and maybe she has in the past, but she said when she was born, she was so beautiful. She said in her mind she would think she won't live long, and that's what, she said. But it was difficult for her. She's still healing, and everything is still a process because not only did she lose a daughter, but she lost a granddaughter at 22 years old as well. So it's a tough thing to do, but she's always been very supportive, her mom. And when she was asked about this particular documentary, she said she would be a part of it.
And there's a lot of, people have their own ideas of what that relationship was like. Because it does seem like Sissy had high expectations for her daughter, and Whitney certainly met them. But it does seem like there was a lot of love and support, and there's this, footage of them hugging, and you know, I think all mother-daughter relationships can be complicated, but this one seemed especially close in a lot of ways, too.
You know, it was close as it could be. I mean, her daughter, she had to share her daughter with the world for 30 years, you know, from the beginning to the end. You know, and family, being a family member, you know, you deal with their emotions from the day that they are born to the day that they die. So all the emotions are there. So we lived it with her. And, you know, just as Sissy's no different than any other mother when it comes to your child growing up, your children growing up. You know, if they don't go off to college, you know, they're independent at that point because society mandates that at 18 that you're grown, you know, and really we take that and run with it. You know, I'm grown, I can do whatever I want to do. You know, so, you know, it was close as it needed to be. And, you know, when she needed her mother, she was certainly there.
Whitney's brothers were very open in this documentary. I had really never heard from them so openly. Gary, your husband, was, but also Michael was really transparent about the drug use and how pervasive it was really on the tour, and how he introduced Whitney to different things, different drugs when she was young. But he was always right there, but he was still a part of it.
Mm-hmm.
So it almost in a way seemed therapeutic for him to share it. Had he been that open anywhere before about, you know, kind of how they were right there with her with the drug use?
No, you know, life is very painful, you know, for them, and I'm sure they have felt quite a bit of responsibility, you know, well, in their hearts and mind. But ultimately, we know that there are choices that we make in our life that could cause our own demise or whatever. But partly, they feel partly responsible, you know, for her not being here, and that's kind of heavy to carry. So, you know, like their mother, you know, sharing their sister for 30 years with the world, you know, and not having her now and always being very protective of the image, you know, it just felt like they were waiting to excel, you know, and this was the time for them to do that, you know, and in the spirit of Whitney, you know, it was the right thing. So when we discussed, you know, making the documentary and filming it, I just told them to be open and honest about your life, and they were, and it did seem like it was a healing process for them as well.
And it was the 80s, so how much of it do you think was just the time, and how much of it was them being young? Because she said, you know, they said that she was introduced to cocaine for the first time at 16.
That was a way of life for
Yeah.
them. You know, in certain parts of the country, certainly in North Carolina, where I was from, we didn't think of drugs, you know, not at all. But in that era and in that time, everyone was doing drugs. You know, I remember, you know, meeting Gary and then meeting a lot of their friends, you know, after moving to New Jersey. That was their conversation. You know, man, you know, remember when we used to, Gary said, not used to, we still are, you know, but it was their way of life. And, you know, sometimes when you start, not sometimes, but when you use drugs recreationally, if you're not careful, it can become a lifestyle. And I think that's what happened with all three of them. You know, they just had a lot of fun, you know, using drugs. It was the it factor and the thing to do, and they just brought it on to, you know, into their adult life.
And Gary, I have to applaud him for his bravery to coming forward about his own sexual abuse with Dee Dee Warwick, and then saying that Whitney was also a part of that. Was that healing in any way for the family, or has that been a tough thing to talk about?
You know, that was a really tough thing to talk about, especially for me, you know, because I actually had to be the person to bring that news to his mother. So it was a new revelation for her. You know, and at first I was extremely angry, you know, with Gary and Whitney. I said, here we go again. You know, I seem to be the apologist all the time, and I've got to take this news to her, and I was not comfortable doing that, but I was not going to allow her to see that, walk in there unaware of what was going to be said. And it was quite a bit overbearing for her. It's something she'll have to process, you know, because as a mother, you know, and you hear this, you know, coming from your son. She didn't hear it from Whitney, but she certainly heard it from Gary. You know, it's a difficult place to be in, you know, but then you have to think about Gary and, of course, Whitney, and, you know, and you think about what they may have gone through, you know, and living with him for as long as I have, and having to experience him trying to be sober and just his struggles. It's like a double-edged sword, you know. Who wins in this situation?
Nobody wins. It's so tough. And you know, in the documentary, they play some clips that she, throughout her career, had been outspoken about how abuse against children was something that really bothered her.
Absolutely.
So do you see that as her way of trying to speak out about something that was really personal, but still kind of keeping herself protected?
Oh, yeah. She gave you something with her music, you know, and everyone gravitated to Whitney because of her music. And even in her death, she's stepping up and she's stepping out and she's speaking out because she does want to help someone, doesn't want any, you know, people to go through life not realizing, you know, what the harsh realities are if you live a certain type of lifestyle. So in her death, she is speaking out, you know, and that's what's important to me, you know, as difficult as this may be to have been working on the project, I'm happy in knowing that she would be satisfied that it was done.
You mentioned her music, and that's when I walked away from it, I just kept thinking, she is going to live forever in that music. And even you're saying that Sissy said even when she was a baby, she felt like she wasn't going to be around for long. That's so powerful because she really kind of was here for a finite amount of time, shared this amazing gift, and that we get to kind of live with forever.
Live with forever. I mean, her platform, you know, her purpose was music. That was her platform and her purpose. So, you know, she did what she wanted to do in life. You know, you have young people all over the world that dream and have aspirations of doing certain things. You know, she did it and she fulfilled it. You know, she brought cultures together. You saw in the film where, you know, cultures from all around the world, you know, were playing her music, singing her music in their language. I mean, who does that, you know?
Can you listen to her music?
Sometimes. You know, it becomes very surreal sometimes when you're, you know, you think about how beautiful she was and how much she loved her craft, you know, but it's painful. And then there are times when it's happy times, you know, and you just laugh and you say, wow, you know, and then you hear about other young women that, you know, when they're introduced or when they talk, they say they want to be like Whitney Houston. Or if someone will say, she sounds like Whitney Houston, and I would always say, no, I said, she's taken already, you know, so build your own platform and do what you do, just as she did, you know, and God will bless you with your gift.
Yeah, nobody sounds like Whitney Houston. One other part of the documentary, it was the first time I've really seen it kind of honestly spoken about, was Robin. Robin was her best friend for a number of years, and it was revealed in this documentary that they did have a romantic relationship, which for me today doesn't feel like that big of a deal. We have a lot of celebrities who are fluid, and that's just a part of their lives. Obviously, Whitney was coming up at a different time. What was the choice of including her in this documentary?
Well, you know, Whitney, as you saw in the documentary, when she was asked if she was gay, she said no. And really, you know, all else is pale in comparison to her not being here. I mean, it doesn't matter. You fell in love with her because of her music. You didn't fall in love with her because you thought she was gay or you thought she had an addiction or anything else. You fell in love with her because of that music. Whitney was always, you know, when she and Robin met, you know, and she's talking about it herself, you know, she didn't have any friends when she was in high school. You know, Robin was a few years older. You know, when they came together as friends. You know, and sometimes we take things like that out of context. You know, you have to really, really watch the film and really hear and understand, you know, what she's saying, and she's narrating her documentary on her own, you know, but they started out as best friends. And I can tell you, you know, whatever happened within their relationship, I never saw that. I saw two women that adored one another, that were close friends. And when I came along, she was already married to Bobby, and Lord knows she was very much in love with that man. So, you know, it's hard sometimes to answer that question because everybody wants to know if she was or if she wasn't. Who cares? You know, she was Whitney Houston, and she gave you, you know, a very, very special gift.
Was there ever a consideration of having Robin be a part of the documentary?
Kevin Macdonald did go to her and ask her about the documentary, and she said no, you know, and, you know, she may be doing something on her own, maybe later on, or it may have been too difficult for her to participate. I don't know, but she was asked.
When I was watching this, I thought so much just about timing. We have so many artists today who are able to talk about their issues. They're able, you mentioned all the documentaries that are coming out. Demi Lovato just, revealed that she's not sober anymore. I mean, it's like now people are able to really break down that wall and they don't have to be perfect as much as they used to.
Mm-hmm.
So do you think Whitney maybe would have had a different experience if she could have just been more herself, instead of having to be like this perfect idea?
I think, a lot of people in the documentary, you may think that they're stating facts, but they're just opinions, with the exception of her brothers and a few others. But Whitney was never a damsel in distress at any point, and she knew who she was. She knew what her platform was. Everybody else just gravitated to that particular platform. She had her own. Do you understand what I'm saying? So she was clear on who she was, and anything beyond that, she would tell you it's none of your business, and that's how that was. And if she wanted anyone to know, she would say it. She was never shy about that.
And before we move on to the audience questions, watching the documentary, I got emotional a handful of times. And one part was obviously with Bobby Christina. A lot of the people in the documentary also got emotional speaking about her. It's just very sad. So what was the thought process of just including that part of it? Because I know that's still a really hard part for the family to talk about.
It was something that needed to be spoken about. You have a lot of young people out there and, young kids out there that are, have gravitated to social media, and that social media has become their social life. And you can get caught up in it so much. It's not enough to just have children, and not everyone that has children can be great parents or know how to be great parents, and you absolutely have to be present in a child's life to help them navigate their way through life, at least through high school and college. So it was important to understand what Chrissy, had to go through, having parents that were on drugs, and the silent suffering behind it. She not only had to deal with drug addiction, but she had to deal with the issues that came along with the drug use, and parents being in the tabloids all the time, and they can definitely cause problems for a child. And I just wanted the parents to take a look at that and understand that you have to be very cautious and careful, what you do in front of your children. I tell folk that, when my daughter Rhea was 3 years old, I learned then to be cautious. My mother was visiting from North Carolina. Of course, Mr. Houston was there. Rhea was 3, and she comes downstairs, and she looks at my mother and her grandfather, and she pulled her little panties between her butt cheeks, and she says, "My mommy wears her panties like this," and I said, "Oh, my God." So I went upstairs, and I threw away every thong that I had. So, what you do in front of your kids, they're watching, and they're imitating, because they're growing and they're learning, and they're the first people that they're watching are their folks. So it was best to have, elements of Chrissy's life in there for people to really understand.
Yeah. And I would imagine for other artists to understand as well the
Absolutely.
impact that their career's having.
Oh, absolutely.
Families, for sure. Did we have any audience questions today? Just one in the back.
Hi. I wanted to know what makes this Whitney documentary different from the rest that has come out? Because last year I saw another one at Tribeca, and this is a new one.
Well, this one is different because you have the family really in it wholeheartedly, and they're extremely very open. And, in order to tell a story, you have to know the story. So it was full cooperation, with the family. And when you see the film, you'll understand why, So it's the reason.
And one more.
Hi, thank you for being here.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just wondering, what was the most challenging part of, creating this story about not just a cultural icon, but someone that you're so personally connected to?
She was an icon, but her story is a human story. It's a human story. She had the same triumphs and tragedies and love and laughter and disappointments, that anyone could have. Her life mirrors ours. She just had to live her life in the public eye, and of course we live our darkness in the shadow, But she gave you music, and it brought you to a level that you cannot disconnect with. And hopefully with this film, she's giving you her story so that you can learn from that as well. So she still has a platform, and her platform is trying to help you understand what could happen, if you owe your allegiance to a certain type of life, that where there is a action, there's a reaction.
I'm with you. It was watching it, like you said, I could connect to it on a lot of different levels, just on a human level. Every family has their ups and downs, and I really do appreciate the Houston family for kind of opening up their hearts and letting people see what was going on. You guys, I'll say it again, it's worth checking out. Like I said, this documentary continues to stick with me. So put your hands together for Pat. Go check out Whitney on July 6th.